So I've been investing in my TFSA now for officially 10 years. Over the years, I've done a lot of things right, but I've certainly made my fair share of mistakes. In this video, I wanna go over my personal best practices and mistakes to avoid so that you can make the most out of your TFSA. Let me know down in the comment section below how many of these do's and don'ts that you either do or don't. Let's have some fun and start off with the don'ts. Let's just get this out of the way. It's of course using the TFSA simply as a savings account. I personally haven't made this mistake, luckily, but I do know how common of an error this is amongst Canadian investors. You can leave a comment down below if that happened to be you at some point. But the first real don't that I want to talk about today, it's a controversial one, but it's don't use your TFSA as your emergency fund. It's very common that investors will buy a GIC or they'll simply park cash in the TFSA as their emergency fund because of how accessible it is and because they can tap into it for tax-free withdrawals whenever they need be. Yes, this is a true statement, but I believe the TFSA is best utilized for finding investments that are going to grow over the long term, not just a place to simply park cash and use as an emergency fund. One of the ways I tend to think of it is almost like the opportunity cost of the space that you have available. And I did think of a fun video game analogy. Not that I play video games anymore, but maybe for some of our younger viewers, this may resonate. You know, in certain video games, when you have a few hotkeys, right? You can map, let's say 3, 4, 5, keys. You want to map those keys, those limited keys or space to the most valuable skills or actions. You want to take full advantage of that. You don't want to be using useless actions or moves to those very 4 valuable keys. Where am I getting at here? With the TFSA, we have such limited space. We have valuable and precious room that, in my opinion, should be best utilized for investing simply than saving. Quick caveat, of course, is if you have a bunch of additional TFSA space and you're nowhere close to maxing it, then sure, it doesn't hurt to park some cash there as an emergency fund. But if you have the option of maxing that out with investments for your future and then maybe parking the emergency fund in a high interest savings account or another alternative, that's the route that I would personally go. Number 2, don't be overly aggressive in your TFSA. I've personally made this mistake with a couple of my worst performing positions. You guys know what that is, in BABA and Tencent. These were 2 stocks that at one point were down 50% in my tax-free savings account. You want to do what you can to avoid bag holding at all costs. We do not want duds in our TFSA portfolio clogging up our precious space. As an investor, it's easy to get overly optimistic and sometimes a little more aggressive than you should be when you have ambitions of finding a stock or an investment that's going to get you to that $1 million portfolio. We need to be very cognizant that the riskier stocks do have that downside potential as well. And oftentimes that's actually what happens. Keep in mind, I personally would consider stocks like BABA and Tencent actually more in the blue chip category, at least based on market cap. They obviously have their own flaws, but I'm not even talking here about penny stocks or meme stocks, which is what a lot of people aim for, thinking they're gonna grow this $1 million tax-free portfolio, when in reality, the opposite happens and you just end up wasting a bunch of space. In my opinion, speaking from experience, with the TFSA, slow and steady is the play. Number 3, a bit more technical, but don't name your spouse as a beneficiary. Now, let me be clear. If you've done that, that's great, but there is a better option. You can take things one step further by setting your spouse, or technically your common law partner, as a successor holder. And this page summarizes it actually decently well. A successor holder would receive the TFSA with the funds still held within it. Therefore, the successor holder would get to keep all of that tax-free room as their own. Whereas with a beneficiary, it's still great. Upon passing, they're still going to get the money and the assets. There is a little bit more paperwork involved. I've done videos on this before, but you could trust me or do a little bit more research. Where applicable, use the successor holder rather than the beneficiary when dealing with the TFSA. Number 4, don't neglect asset location amongst your various accounts. Particularly, what I'm talking about here is the 15% withholding tax on foreign dividends, a very popular topic. I've spoken about this lots on the channel, but for those not familiar, in the TFSA, foreign dividends, most commonly, we'd be looking at US dividends. So a US stock like Coca-Cola or Walmart that pays us a dividend, those dividends are subject to withholding tax. To be clear, I don't think it's a mistake to hold US dividend paying stocks in your TFSA. A lot of people do that, but it is something that we want to be aware about. Because in certain situations, if we were to think of things in a glass bubble, It is true that our US dividend paying stocks may be better suited in the RRSP. So if you have a TFSA, if you have an RSP, again, looking at things simply on a glass bubble, putting that stock, the US dividend paying stock that is, in the RSP would arguably be more favorable. Again, this is very situational and it is not wrong to hold US stocks in the TFSA, in my opinion, but there is a good argument that if you have both accounts and you do have the option of buying them in each, there is a preferential location that you could be putting your assets in. Now, before we move on to the do's, what we do want to do, the best practices with the TFSA, if you are a Canadian and you like learning about things like the TFSA like this, I'd encourage you to download our free app, Blossom. We have over 150,000 users in a community talking money, talking finance, talking investments, sharing what they're doing. It is completely free. It's an amazing place to learn amongst each other. There's a QR code up on the screen, or you can simply search up Blossom in the App Store. I really think you guys would enjoy it. But moving right along into the do's, or the best practices to do with the TFSA. Number one, you gotta track your own contributions. Do not rely on your brokerage. Do not rely on the CRA. They really don't care about what you're doing. Get a spreadsheet going, get a little pen and notepad, a piece of paper if you have to, some sort of system where you are tracking your contributions. When you're just starting out, you think, oh, this won't be a big deal. But when years and years go by and you have new space and you're pulling money in and out of the account, it can start to get confusing. And of course, we don't want to ever over contribute beyond our contribution limits, because then you are subject to the 1% penalty per month. We do not want to find ourselves in this situation, and it's a very simple fix. Track your contributions yourself. Number two, possibly another controversial one, but don't feel bad if you need to tap into your TFSA when necessary. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that we get in the habit of tapping into our investments and delaying and disrupting the compounding that we should be doing with our investments. But there are times where life hits us and we do need to tap into some of our money. The TFSA is a great account to do this with. As a personal example, you guys may recall when I actually tapped into my TFSA when I was closing on my first home and I needed to come up with some money for the down payment. Now, key point there is that tapping into this funds, I wasn't using it to go on a vacation. I wasn't going out and buying new clothes or a new car that wasn't necessary. I was putting it towards, in my opinion, another, good asset. But the point is, when you do need to access money from your investments, the TFSA is not a bad account at all because of the flexibility that it provides. Remember that with the TFSA, money that we withdraw, we get that space back in the next calendar year. Whether that's $1,000, whether that's $10,000, whether that's $50,000, I can withdraw that, wait for the calendar year to tick over, and I'm gonna get that contribution space back. This is very different to the RSP, by the way, where of course when you make withdrawals, not only are you taxed, but you also lose that contribution room going forward. Third thing to do with your TFSA, this is a good one, it's gifting your spouse or partner some money to put into their TFSAs. I've personally done this one. Keep in mind that in Canada, there is no such thing as a joint TFSA or a spousal TFSA. We all have our own TFSAs. And if you're in a situation where you've maxed yours, but maybe your partner or spouse earns less money than you, maybe they're a stay-at-home and they just haven't had the opportunity, but they still have all that space available, maybe not a bad decision when you're looking at your household wealth or your family's net worth is taking some of that money, gifting it to your partner, and letting them put it in and investing in their tax-sheltered plan. And number four, a universal one for all, it's of course to aim to max out the TFSA each and every year. Here in 2024, we have the $7,000 annual limit. That may sound like a lot to some people, but when you break that up monthly, that's $583 per month. It's a lot more palatable when you look at it that way, and you contribute a little bit on a weekly or monthly basis, chipping away at that bigger amount. Some people are in a situation where they can just plop money in and max it out. That's great too. But of course, the goal that we are all striving for, whatever way you end up doing it, is utilizing this precious, precious room that we have, making a little bit of sacrifice on our spending today to put money towards our future. So these here are my personal do's and don'ts of the TFSA. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Would love to hear what you guys think. But as always, I thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.